move and to walk and to be able to move around, but that is your parking separate. So when you're thinking about this stuff, always keep that in mind when you're looking at entertainment, particularly things that are live. I mean, this ordinance prohibits literary readings in your home. It prohibits birthday parties where you have a clown. We had an assistant DA after Jazz Fest one year who was in the backyard. It was like 6 o'clock in the afternoon, who had some friends over playing music in the backyard who got cited by the city of New Orleans for a violation of the zoning ordinance. It wasn't that it was too loud. It wasn't. There was no other infraction other than he was having live entertainment in a place where it was not permitted in his backyard of his home.
So the point being there that this is a prime opportunity to put forth a proactive vision of how to regulate this in a way that supports culture. And I think a point that you really sort of called out was an idea of performance zoning, which is, and a sort of, again, a sort of academic term for a broad-based idea, but it regulates those points on what zoning is really supposed to protect against, which is externalities in the surrounding neighborhood. That being noise, that being way too much parking, that being like way too, like if you had like giant Krieg floodlights like blasting into your neighbor's house and lighting it up all night. And
what do you call it? External?
Externalities.
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 I have my arm up several times and you're still ignoring me.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
It's okay. My question had to do with, you were talking about grandfathered in and you were talking about neighbors. What about when someone has been, or a performance has been taking place for a long time and then new neighbors move in and don't like it? Now, what has been happening in 2 or 3 different areas is that the new neighbors moving in had money and had bought city council people that were too rude.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that what has happened is that the music has been diminished, tackled, cut out, varying in different places depending upon what kind of attack. One of the ones was that music used to take place in front of the Cafe du Monde until about 10 o'clock at night.
Right. So the reality is that...
But wait a minute, let me finish. Then somebody who was from California moved into the apartment building there in the Lower Cantalba, and he said to me that he'd waited for 7 years to get into that apartment. And I said, excuse me, in that 7 years you never noticed there was music on the floor? He said, well, he didn't know that it would bother him.
But I think part of that is people that they can come in, there are ordinances on the books and existing things that haven't necessarily been enforced either. And so a lot of times they're able to use things that are already there to then start influencing. So if you look at things like a live entertainment thing, you talk about, they specifically list, if you are a DJ, it talks about, this includes records, like CDs and two other types of things you could DJ, right? So it's so specific that it'll give sometimes the people the tools to be able to do things and sort of enforce things that may not have other been. So I think there's the open door policy. If you look at even the Frenchman Street overlay, it talks about if there's live entertainment, doors and windows should be closed. So that's one thing that you can come in and just say that you haven't been doing this, and so there's got to be compromise ultimately reached. And right now.
Well, no, I mean, at a very basic level, unless you have it legally written, if you don't change the ordinance and it's technically against the law, like a super shitty pardon my language, but a super shitty new neighbor can move in, and if on the books what you're doing is illegal, can get it enforced as illegal. And so that is why it's really important to really look at proposing changes to the new zoning ordinance, because even if something's not enforced for another decade, like, it can get in, it will be enforced at some point if it's on the books, and that will feel capricious and terrible to almost everyone besides the one crappy neighbor who's calling it.
Right, and I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You need one person to start making that noise to draw attention to something that's been happening.
Can we let all three of you talk quickly, and then we'll
so
1, 2, 3.
In your fictitious sandwich shop, you can hang art on the wall by a local artist and sell it, but you can't have a band.
I would, so that's an excellent question. And I have not read the zoning ordinance close enough to be able to tell you the answer to that question.
Because a painting's not live performance. It's just
Exactly. I'm pretty. That is not because I can sell the commodity.
Between the arts, I guess, is my question.
I think that's an excellent question for putting into comments.
So I just want to say one thing. We're not the city. We're gonna try to get the city here at some point so they can take some more direct questions that can actually explain what their thinking is and take comments. And I can't absolutely promise you they'll be here, but we've talked to them and sort of starting a dialogue with them to make sure that they can be here to answer more specifically as to a question like that says, this is my guess is because one is loud and one is not generally, right? But I mean that's just. But they talk about they talk about dynamite blast and how often is that ever an issue? But it's in there because someone knows.
Well, I mean, part of this is because, right? So, again, any change to the zoning ordinances and particularly to overlays is going to involve negotiation community. One of the reasons why the push for this and this is there's no one trusts the noise ordinance to be enforced. So it's a very blunt tool, right, to make it very hard to have more loud music if you don't trust that the sort of externality of loud music is not going to be enforced. And so that an ordinance, therefore, is not meaningful until you have to stop it from ever opening.
Right.
If the city claims to us every time they get a complaint, they have to jump on it.
That's
The
what
city
I'm
claims
today.
to us that every time they get a complaint, they have to jump on it.
Okay.
But I think to
Well, with
okay,
two
go ahead.
more quickly.
Go ahead.
I was just regarding the choosiness of the enforcement of the zoning laws, like specific to what Rosalind was saying. The French Market Court, which also has recently been restructured and remanaged and everything, issues performer permits for that section outside of Café du Monde. So on the one hand, a musician has a permit to perform right there, and then you have zoning saying, well, technically you're not supposed to, and then you have this neighbor who just moved in saying, I don't want that.
They got to take it up with the French market.
That's a different question. Zoning deals with the regulation of use of property. What you're talking about deals with public streets and spaces. There's a whole different set of laws and regulations that apply for use of public spaces, and that's the most direct interface you're going to see with the First Amendment, constitutional rights of speech and expression in public spaces. So that's a separate issue. from
Right,
what
the
you're
zoning
talking
would be
about.
enforcing what could happen on the French Market's building property. Not the public sidewalk outside.
What was the last?
Well,
But how do you decide where the public sidewalk starts and where it ends?
There is an actual legally surveyed property line.
Right.
Well, yeah, the French Market Court seems to believe that it extends all the way out to the street.
I mean,
Because that's where
somewhere that line is
that's what they
drawn.
issued a
Well,
permit
that's
for.
where you can find the answer though and present them with paperwork. Be
Right.
like, oh, you
Yeah,
think
like
it's
we-
out to the street, but it's
It's
not.
not.
Here's the
Right.
fact. And
Right.
show it to them and be
A
like, I can be here.
Yeah.
In 2004, a lot of these-
And that is what City Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Adjustments are, like, they spend a whole portion of their day as literally doing basic zoning checks on anyone before they can go through any next process of getting a building permit. And they can help you look at the French Market and be like, okay, here's their property line and here's the public right of way.
And
So
you
that
can
is all.
Talk to the CPC, and like I said, a lot of these things exist. It's very difficult to necessarily get there to start. But the answer, some of these are there. And the more armed you are with that answer, the more you can attack this from a way that is sort of able to deal with people that have already done that research, right? Because a lot of people that come and do this kind of sort of one person complaining has already researched all this stuff, knows where this is, knows what the ordinance is, knows when to shut off. So you're already disadvantaged saying, well, wait a minute, because they've already spent all this time coming up to it, doing it. And I think, just real quick, to what point that Heidi had talked about was neighborhood groups talking about, complaining about noise or things like that. A lot of times you'll see a neighborhood group, someone's proposing to open a club or start new music, and a lot of times what they'll say is, we're not worried about you, we're worried about when you leave and the use stays, and someone else can come in and be an irresponsible neighbor and do that. So that's something that you hear over and over and over, I think, is it's not you, we think you're fine, but if you leave or if you sell, someone else can come in and not abide by whatever you say you're going to do. So I think that's something that, right, but that's something that needs work. People with neighbors will a lot of times take it to sort of the extreme. We know that you just want to do, a piano player, but someone else might come in and start a bounce club, right? Because if you allow the zoning and the permitting says you can do it, they theoretically could, right? So
Can't you have a permit that says you can have a piano player?
No, the live entertainment.
So, and a lot of this points to the need for real reform within both the zoning code and the permitting process and the enforcement being uniform and consistent so that community can trust that enforcement will allow a more permissive zoning code to go forth. And so that the CPC wants comments, but they need them to be specific and to be engaging.
I just have one thing, okay.
Oh wait, I promised her that she was next, and then I'll.
Well, and I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm Kelly. I'm a Jackson Square Terror reader and a member of the General Assembly Jackson Square.
Okay, Kelly, nice to meet you. She actually kind of touched on where I was going with it being there being a difference between the venue, the zoning being particular to venue or brick and mortar spacing or parcels of land versus public space performance allowances. And to me, that kind of seems to be a distinction. Maybe like that's part of my questioning too. Is the zoning policy dictates regulation on actual brick and mortar buildings and parcels of land, but it does not dictate regulation on what you can do on a public sidewalk or a public street per se. And that's a different set of policy to talk about on a different day. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
That is accurate.
Right.
Okay, just want to make sure. So when we're talking about like street performance versus live entertainment within a venue or on a specific parcel of land, those are actually two different sets of laws that we're talking about.
Yep.
And today's teaching is specifically about zoning, which regulates parcels of land and brick and mortar buildings.
But as we sort of talked on that pyramid point, right, the zoning goes up to the permitting, which goes up to the enforcement to get to what that actually ends up looking and working like when you're having live music on a parcel. And so that's where sort of that street performance comes in at the same place, is the sort of permitting where the enforcement, that's where those sort of meet.
I mean,
Right. Just to kind of
Sure, no, but there are sort of tiers there.
Right. It's a company, they are sort of
I'm gonna get
interrelated.
clarity on this, okay? The way that the zone and the codes are written right now today in New Orleans, okay?
Are you talking about the proposed new zoning ordinance or
I'm
one
talking
that's
about
currently
right
in
now,
process?
and the way that it is, there are only so many blocks on the city grid that are legally zoned for live entertainment. Is that correct?
It's almost worse.
There are almost none that are as of right.
Right, it's conditional.
Everything is conditional. Everything you'd have to go
Live
through a
entertainment is
process.
prohibited except for permitted, and it can be permitted under many different forms. One, it can be in the zone where it's specifically permitted, like if it was an industrial or something. It can be grandfathered in, like if you had a place that had like live music, like Snug Harbor or something, when the zoning stuff was passed, they're grandfathered in. It can be a place that is permitted because they have achieved a non-conforming use, and they now are established by law, and so they're permitted to do it. Maybe some question if they stop doing it at some point, they will lose it. But the problem comes also if you want to open a new place, or it may be permitted because you're in an overlay district, which are relatively new. When we started with Frenchman Street, we didn't have overlay districts. So you've got the VC Entertainment District, House of Blues is allowed. You've got several. This is a new concept. A lot of this with these
and
overlay
Fred
districts.
has an overlay
So
district.
it would be really useful at some point if you got a map and did a map of the city of New Orleans to see where the places where live entertainment is permitted.
That's my master's thesis, is that.
There it is.
Eventually there will be one.
So in the VCE Entertainment District, is it still only conditional use? Or
Yes.
Yeah, look at the code, but yes.
Yes.
And there are prohibitions on, particularly in that specific overlay, a lot of it's about bringing speakers outside. A lot of the focus of the overlay is
Well,
on
mine falls directly into this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sitting VCE 1, where House of Blues is. Okay. The way the structure of my company and my building will not allow me to fall into the category of a nightclub, will not allow me to fall into the category of a supper club. I used to be Tarantula Arms, and so that grandfather, since in between then, the green room did not have music, I lost my grandfather. However, when I purchased it, I made some mistakes in purchasing it. And one of the things that I listened to was some incorrect information saying that I was still allowed to continue to do this. So I started it up.
Right.
Went several months before I ran into some problems. Now, coming out of this, want the CPC, if I want to suggest something that is more specific for my situation, I need to know how to do that, because if I can fit into a nightclub category, that means I'm going to have to put another $30,000 into the upstairs, and then it's just going to go up from there. Otherwise, I'm stuck with the problem of the 300-foot rule, which does not allow me, since I'm next to them, doesn't allow me to have the music because I'm within 300 feet of them. How and what steps should I take to start tailoring something towards me specifically? And I know that there's other places around that fit in my little category that have been trying to get music and have been shot down as well. And they fit in VCE1 as well.
Okay. I'm going to actually just, as a general thing for today, I think we're not going to get into specific business, so just like the specifics of particular businesses, just because this is a really broad teaching.
No, I'm just asking what.
I mean,
who should I submit? How should I tailor?
You gotta read the ordinance, which I'm sure you have, but you gotta look and you gotta see what elements are that you fit in and what are the ones you don't.
Kathleen, in terms of time, I'm going to say you guys should talk after specifically, just because I do want to wrap this up on time.
I mean, the more general point on that is that you always have to read the ordinance when you have an issue. And then you got to figure out if there are other people who have the same issue, because you can argue a case for a change in the ordinance itself together with the group much more effectively. But in terms of an individual, you got to go to CPC and start going through the variance process.
So this is a point that's actually important. The city is broken into planning districts, and so different districts are assigned to a different planner within CPC. You can find out what your district is and find out who your planner is to talk to, and he can start to work with you directly on sort of issues that you have more locally. But again, I don't want to answer that question because I don't want to tell you the wrong information as well. I want to make sure that you can ask to actually have someone from the city as well that can actually help you work through that process in a way that I think that we cannot actually work you through that whole process as not
contact the district, find out who your planner is, and make an appointment.
Alright, you two really quickly.
Alright, y'all, let's do a couple last, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
I understand that we are moving towards reform of these laws, which is a fabulous idea. Are we stockpiling these issues, making a list, and if so, who's holding that list of issues that we want to grapple? I mean, I hear like the grandfather, 6 months is just kind of crazy when you're trying to get into a business and make some changes and launch a new project. Also, the transfer of ABO, moving with the property. And these are all issues that stymie. And so I'm just wondering, are we maybe making a comprehensive list that committees are going to?
I hope so.
I think MaCCNO was taking notes of everything.
Yeah, there's a list. I would say there's a listing of the specific case studies that have come up, because on the Google group that the planning committee uses, where we do the planning every Friday for these Wednesday meetings, we have an ongoing Google group that has a different topic for each thing that's brought to our attention. So there's one for, Bambula, the new place opening on Frenchman Street, and one for the St. Cloud Overlay District, and one for Jimmy's. Anything that gets brought to our attention gets kind of archived in that Google group. So in that way, there is an ongoing list. In terms of the issues themselves, there hasn't been a compact list of those made yet, but that's a really good idea. That's something that we can talk about.
So maybe that's something we'll work on Friday. But I'm also wondering, is there like a far off date that we need to be like hustling to get this together towards?
Yes.
There's like a master planning.
Yes, the next round of CZO meetings, which they are hoping to conduct. This date has moved, like this was supposed to happen a year ago, so as I say that it's supposed to happen in late spring, I cannot imagine it's going to be any earlier than that. It would only be any later than that.
Late
it's supposed to be, okay, so it's supposed to be this week. Make sure the handout we have has some basic information about the process and zoning.
That's when the next round of public meetings will be. You can submit targeted comments at any point.
Right, but they're hoping to do the next round of big public meetings in late spring. I think that sounds ambitious, but I think also we need to be ready for it. I think that to your point, we talk a lot about so the zoning ordinance is an issue that MaCCNO really should be tackling and something to move on. I don't think we have specific points figured out in that yet, but I think zoning is sort of the next big issue and it's the transformational thing. I mean, if we can start to push issues in the zoning code, we can actually make things transformational in the city.
When you say late spring, are you talking about late May or middle of June?
They just told me late spring.
But June
so-
20th is summer, so late spring is up till the 19th of June.
It's the city of New Orleans, so the answer is possible.
So around Thanksgiving then.
Yeah, I think that's very good. It could be accurate. I think so. Who was the second hand? Yeah.
So I'm actually purchasing some property next month, and I just need to know how, like, I'd actually like to maybe open a bar downstairs. I have some friends on board helping me with like the ADO and everything.
Right.
But how do I find out the exact zoning or the exact?
You go to you conduct the zoning check at the CPC.
And anything like that, please stick around and talk sort of about specific cases afterwards. That's super important, but I don't want to have that as part of the larger group. And
There's just one other point. One of the most important things I think you all said today is the term mixed use. That defines a lot of our neighborhoods right now. Musicians, lovers and supporters of culture, club owners, we live in this city. If you're not going to them yet, join your neighborhood association, start going to those meetings. This is not just a formal process of changing the laws, it's also a process, a lot of this happens in those meetings. And a lot of the position or stance that your neighborhood association is going to take is critical, because that's who these city council members listen to. And you remember, they'll use the expression a lot that before the master plan, zoning in New Orleans was done by kissing the ring. What that meant was that you had to get on your knees and kiss the ring of the city council member who was in the district that you wanted the change made. The master plan was supposed to change that. It has not changed that, because we live in New Orleans and this is the real politics of this stuff. And what we need to be involved in the community level is also listening to the legitimate concerns. We also live in these neighborhoods. You want livable, breathable neighborhoods. And you want conditions. You want a lot of these restrictions. We complain about them. Some of them are reasonable and legitimate, and we need to participate in that process to separate out those which are fair and reasonable and lead to like a vibrant, diverse communities, and those which are suppressing the culture, and know the difference. Know the difference. So if you haven't done it already, please, particularly people who live in these neighborhoods where these issues are really popping up, which is the Faubourg Marigny, which is Bywater, which is in the French Quarter, go to these meetings and participate. That's,
And I think also, just to piggyback, we talk about the planning department, think about them as a potential partner. I think looking at, especially with the way the master plan, that kind of stuff was developed, it wasn't that they wanted to exclude all this arts and culture stuff. A lot of times when I talk to people, they just didn't know how to include it or what to do. And I think they'll be much more open than I think you might think to come and hear these things and sort of include it, because they don't necessarily, they haven't got the input to know exactly what to do or how to do it. So in some ways they're working on old information, they're working without information, so they need this voice to come in and tell them this is what it needs to be to make us thrive.
Okay, it's 1:15, and that had been kind of our proposed length for a meeting. If there's anything else that was super pressing that anybody wants to say, let's do that right quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hey everybody, I'm with the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, and we're going to be holding a community forum on March 22nd about culture and regulation. So we're going to be covering, actually not very much of this ground, because we're not going to be talking too specifically about zoning in New Orleans per se, although Dave Woolworth is going to be making a presentation on his findings. But if you are interested in what New York City, Charlottesville, Virginia, Oakland, California, and Los Angeles are doing about these things, it'll be a good opportunity to hear that.
When and where?
March 22nd, and
It'll be on the paper.
yeah.
I'll let you know.
All the information. And then I saw you as well.
Yeah, just a couple of things. If you want to go to the City Planning Commission's website, it's cpc.nola.gov. And then they're also going to be moving their offices next week, so they're no longer going to be at this address. They'll be at the 7th floor of City Hall. And so keep in mind, if you try to call them in the next couple of weeks, they might be a bit busy because they are moving, so just keep that in mind.
And that website address is among the links that are sent out in our regular Monday mailings as well, so that information is made accessible every week. In terms of wrapping up, anybody, I know like 5 times today, there are people that said things, I've said, oh, put it on here. Please make sure that anything like that was mentioned does make it onto here in terms of dates and times and specifics of things, so that it's accessible to everybody. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
this is great.
I guess, do you guys have any sort of last, final, wrapping up type things?
We'll stick around for a little while afterwards. You can come and talk to us. I'm usually here almost every week, so you can come and talk to me, and then we can continue the dialogue. As I said, this is the first This is the only zoning and sort of, we're trying to get the CPC to actually come in here and start doing these more specific. So we will follow up with that as well. Again, since they're moving offices, the time frame on that is a little up in the air.
And thank you for some really good questions.
And today also, I'm sorry, the Food Network, I think, is filming here at 3 o'clock, and they need a crowd, and Kermit is starting to cook at 2. There's free food. Just putting that out there. And I will stay, I want to stay here as well if there's any other questions or sort of follow-up type things, if people want to know how to get connected more on particular issues, please come and find me or Ethan or Kathleen.
And also these guides are downloadable from the Foundation for the Beginner website, and you can take them and please distribute them as widely as you'd like. They're a free resource.
Get signed up for digital tip jar. One of the programmers who worked on it are here today, right now.
Yeah, any musicians in the room, I have an opportunity for you, so just raise your hand if you don't have your
email. Let's get an email from that. I'm going to roll in the
Thank you so much for that. It's so great to have like getting it played like a session and so great to hear.